Today we have father and son, Andrew and Nick Temte. We chat with the musical duo about their recent collaboration and single Hitching a Ride. We learn about their approach to songwriting and the recording process, the anticipation of hitting the stage with Andy's rock group The Remainders, and Nick gives us the backstory on the single's cover art. You can find more conversations, food reviews, live music, and events on our website, lacrosselocal.com. I'm Amy.
And I'm Brent.
And this is Lacrosse Local.
Caught your eye and it wasn't just a glance. Brushed by the body and I knew we had to dance. I felt our hearts beat together. I'm hitching a ride to spend my days and nights with you. I'm hitching a ride with you.
So Nick, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Perhaps what led you to music?
Sure. I grew up in a musical family. Obviously, my dad has been performing my whole life, and other family members being really musical as well. But I'd say specifically watching my dad perform with the Remainders growing up was a huge inspiration in the way that, when you're a kid watching your dad do something, you really want to do that thing. I would watch him do that, and since it was my dad that I was seeing up there, I saw it as more of a possibility than if it wasn't my dad. That was a huge start for me. My dad's been performing with the Remainders for as long as I can remember, so watching him as a kid was very inspiring for me to want to do that myself. So then as soon as I was old enough, I've been performing in bands as well. That's, I guess, been like the constant thread throughout my life is performing and writing, and I found that music overall is just the best way to channel my creative energy. I've tried a few different outlets, but music is always my most honest way to express myself.
We came here to talk about, kind of a father-son collaboration and the single that you are releasing, Hitching a Ride. Andy, what's the story behind the song?
Yeah, it's a really cool story because, the song has been percolating since 2016. I was on a bike ride in the bluffs east of La Crosse on Highway 33, and I'm all dressed up in my, Lycra gear on my bike, just pedaling away. And I look down at the road and there's this gigantic bug, about 3 inches around sitting on my leg. And I looked down at it and it didn't appear to be any threat to me at all. And I just looked down and said, "Oh, buddy, you're hitching a ride." And then once that kind of came into my mind, then the melody and the lyrics and everything just kind of fell into place. And I was that crazy old guy that you see riding a bike down the road with his phone in his hand. I had my audio recorder and I'm trying to hum the melody and speak the lyrics into the phone. And as soon as I got home, ran into my office and just wrote it all down. So that was the inspiration for the tune.
That would have been some sight for people to see you just kind of actively going after it on the side of the road. So Nick, I also understand that you contributed to the song by writing several of the song's parts. Where do you fit into the project, and also what's your inspiration?
Yeah, so, since my dad has been in the Remainders my whole life, I've been kind of surrounded by classic rock as my kind of starting genre. As I grew up, I started to kind of rebel with my music taste. So I was in a metal band in high school. And then in college, I was in a hip-hop collaborative while studying classical music. So I feel like I've gotten kind of a good inspiration from just about everywhere you could imagine. And then I also have been a huge fan of Rush my whole life, pretty much. And that's something my dad and I have in common. That's been consistently probably my favorite band. They influenced the bass line heavily, but like other bands like Foreigner and stuff like that influenced like the keyboard and the drums and all that. But yeah, I tried to basically draw from all these influences and bring in modern elements while making sure like the classics were still represented.
So, the big question is collaborating on any song, I'm sure it's a process, but how is it collaborating in songwriting? How is that doing that with family, with your dad?
Well, it's definitely, to be honest, not something I would have foreseen, like when I was younger, like in high school, definitely. But even in my early 20s, I would have been a little skeptical if you would have told me that was going to happen. But just with how organically it all came about. Like we were up there, I was up there for Christmas this past year, and we obviously had a lot of time at the house. And about a year before that, I had actually built my dad a studio in his basement just as a surprise before we left town for Chicago. And so we used that space to. He's like, I got this idea for a song, and let's just put it down and see what happens. And so we did that, and one thing led to another, and we just kept plugging away at it. And then we decided, let's get the band involved. Let's really make this song come to life. So it was actually really awesome how just organically it all happened. And as far as working with my dad, it's been actually better than I could have expected. Since we know each other so well, we really work off each other in a way where knowing when to back off when one person's on a roll, and knowing like when to give input when the other person has hit a wall or something like that has been really important to our collaborative process.
And Andy, how has the process been for you? How did the song come from that original idea to a finished product?
Yeah, like Nick said, they were up from Chicago visiting over the Christmas holiday, and Christmas had come and passed, and we had a few days, and it was like, Nick, let's go down into that studio you built, and let's try to do something with this song that I wrote like 5 years ago. So we sat down in this. At the time, we've expanded the studio since then, but it was this little tiny cupboard under the stairs, kind of like a Harry Potter thing, and we laid down the melody tracks first, and then some keyboard lines came into my head, and Nick is tapping out the drums on a drum pad with his fingers. Yeah, and we got all the guts of the song laid down then. And then we started, that kind of formal process of making sure that this was going to be something that we would be really proud of. Again, get the band involved, get some other folks involved in the process. So it's taken from that time where we had the skeleton down at Christmas, it's taken a good 5 months of really hard work, especially on Nick's part, because he's the main producer, and I gave Nick a lot of creative freedom in the production part of it to kind of run. And it's just been so enjoyable, a little maddening at times because, you feel like it needs to go faster, and I want to get that song out there, but I think everybody's going to be really pleased.
Pulling in the remainders, which I'm sure is exciting to do. And also you guys are hitting the stage for Riverfest on June 30th. What role did the band play for this recording process?
Yeah, so we took the drum parts, and Nick's got this awesome computer program that lays everything out in sheet music. So we gave that to Steve Duff. We gave the outlines to Steve Duff on the keyboards. Same thing with Josh Shively on the drums, Johnny Nielsen on the guitar, and Greg Balfany on the sax. Nick wrote the bass part, and Ed Overholt, who's our bass player, was so gracious and said, hey, you guys do the father-son thing, and I'll just play whatever you guys come up with. And they all went into Mike Von Muchow's studio. You probably know Mike well, and our listeners in the area know Mike as one of the backbones of the music scene here. And they went into Mike's studio and laid down their parts and then sent them off to Nick, and then Nick would stitch them together. It was a real kind of community collaboration.
So, just talking about, recording, playing, is this first Remainder show at Riverfest? Is this going to be your first show in front of a larger crowd? I know you did a few pandemic shows streamed live, but is this going to be the one?
Yeah. The last time we played was in early November in 2019. So you do the math on the number of months that is since we've been live on stage, and we've got the hives. We are just itching to get on stage and perform again. Everybody's had their COVID pods. Totally. And my dear wife Linda and I have had a friend pod that's mainly composed of family, and then she's got her horse pod, and I've got the band pod, and that's what kept our heads together through COVID, was to have, bring our circles way in, be very small and tight, be very careful during practice, but we've learned a lot of new tunes, and we're going to be rolling out Hitching a Ride on June 30th at Riverfest.
Ready to blow the doors off the thing. So kind of switching back to Hitching a Ride, you also shared some cover art with us. What's the backstory on the creative?
Yeah, so I had just a sudden inspiration this past weekend, and I knew the deadline was approaching really, really quickly. But that's usually where I get my best ideas and my best inspiration. I feel like that's similar to a lot of people who work creatively. Is once it's crunch time, you get this neat idea. Yeah, so there's a couple Easter eggs here in the artwork. One main thing is that the big red car. I didn't know exactly what kind of car I wanted. I knew I wanted not like a newer car, but I knew I wanted a red car, and that's because my mom really has an affinity for red sports cars, and she's had a couple of them. So I wanted to give that nod to her. The obvious kind of metaphor of the two people in the image here kind of driving into the sunset, it really works with the song. And the sunset itself is actually, that's actually an image that was taken by my mom in their place on the bluffs in La Crosse. So that's a La Crosse sunset right there. And then on the license plate, for those who care to zoom in close enough, there's the America's Dairyland on the very bottom to give a little nod to the locals.
It's the excitement of kind of getting outdoors, last couple of weeks, people at restaurants, lots of live music. I've already seen a few bands. What are you guys excited for? Like, what's next for you or individually or the band? What are you excited for in 2021 or 2022?
I'll take this because I will be moving on in my career later this year. I haven't made a formal public announcement about that, but I guess now's the best time as any. The folks within the business I work for know that I'll be leaving. But Nick and I are going to be partners in a business. We're going to do some business-related podcasting. Brent, you were gracious enough to interview me on my book, Balancing Act. The first thing that we're going to do is produce the audiobook for that, weave some music into the interstitials there. And then we've got the Balancing Act podcast that will continue together. We've got another business podcast that we're thinking about, a workbook for the Balancing Act to kind of bring it to life for business leaders. And, Nick and I've got 30 plus years of business experience, and Nick is, highly creative. He's got skills that I don't. I have skills that he doesn't. And it's going to be a lot of fun complementing each other. And we've got another song. Nick, you want to take this one?
Yeah. We're going to be working on a new song pretty much right when this one gets released, and I'm able to free up some time to do it. But he's already come to me with another idea. And how long has this one been in the works, in your head at least, Dad?
I wrote this 37 years ago.
It's awesome.
37. And he sent me just an acoustic track and just the voice, and it could stand really well as just an acoustic track. But we're gonna take it and kind of add some full band elements, have the Remainders do their thing again, because they did so well with. I just gave them very minimal kind of guidelines on what to do for Hitching a Ride. Like, here's what we wrote, but do your thing. So I'm really looking forward to the creative elements that they add to this next song as well, and songs going forward. We'll put together, I imagine, a whole EP before the year's over. So
if people want to find out more, I know they're going to be able to check you out at Riverfest June 30th, but if people want to find out more, what's the best avenue to send them to?
Again, with Nick's help, we'll be launching a new Remainders website here. And that'll be live by the time this podcast drops. And that's theremainders, all one string.com. You can also find us on Facebook and on Instagram. And then we've got the Andrew Temte Facebook presence, and we'll be building a website for Balancing Act and the other products that we'll be bringing to market as we move along. And Brent, if it's not obvious to our listeners, the song Hitching a Ride is all about how I'm hitching a ride with my dear wife, Linda, in the wonderful journey that we've had. So got to make sure that plug gets in there.
La Crosse Local Podcast is a production of River Travel Media. Do you have an interview idea you'd like to share with us? Message us on Facebook at La Crosse Local. Find out more about us at lacrosselocal.com. And you can subscribe to the La Crosse Local Podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you like us, rate us 5 stars. We appreciate it.